Hey all, Bree from the No Guilt Mom podcast, and I have got a gift for you this holiday season. If you love the No Guilt Mom podcast, and I mean love the No Guilt Mom podcast, then tell us about it. Leave us a review, and you can be entered to win a No Guilt Mom gift card. All you have to do is leave a review, take a screenshot, and then simply go to noguiltmom.com/review to enter our giveaway for a free No Guilt Mom gift card, simply for telling us what you think about the podcast. It is amazing. But don't delay. Get right on this, as we're going to be giving away that No Guilt Mom gift card on December 21st. So get right on over and visit noguiltmom.com/review.
Welcome to the No Guilt Mom podcast. I am your host, Joanne Crone, joined here by my You Got This co-host, Bree Tucker.
Why, hello, everybody. How are you?
So I'm like all fired up today because all of the emotions are going through my brain. Because you know what? I'll admit this freely because I know all the women out there will understand. I'm about to get my period. And I'm like, everything is going like, every little thing, guys. Every little thing.
Okay, what does that mean about me? Because I feel like that almost all the time.
Well, I feel little bits of that all the time, but like right now, like
it's so intense.
Every little stressor, like just one little stressor in particular is we have a pool in our backyard, and we have this great guy, Chris, who comes and cleans our pool. And he brought me into the backyard and he's like, yeah, all the leaves are now wrecking your pool equipment. Because the backstory on that is we have like neighbors all around us, and our neighbors' trees are so thick and they're like hanging over our pool. And I love trees and I love nature. And
it is a beautiful backyard.
It is really beautiful.
Such a beautiful back.
And I hate confrontation.
I don't blame you. As soon as I walked in and you told me what you were talking about, I'm like, ooh, that's never fun. Like, it seems like almost everybody out here in Arizona owns a pool.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of trees here in Arizona to try to get some shade. They're not your typical like oak trees or something you would see in the Midwest.
It's a ficus.
Yeah.
Big ficuses.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so they shed a lot. We'll just say that. Plus the monsoon season, it's awful. So I've been there. I know what it's like having to have that conversation with the neighbor of like, hey, your tree's ruining my pool.
Oh, it's hard. And you know what? The neighbor on another side of me, their tree, the root is uprooting the wall. And so there's like cracks in the
double
wall.
Double whammy conversation.
So I'm like, oh, so I'm going to bake some cookies.
I honestly think that's not a bad idea.
And then I'm going to get the cookies. I'm going to print out the photos of the trees hanging over my pool and be like, hey, I made you some cookies. By the way, could you trim your trees, please? And then I'm going to do I'm going to probably leave them at the door. Because here's the other kicker. Like, I know that the neighbor behind me, she stays home with her baby, and I don't want to wake up the baby and like ringing the doorbell to talk to them, because I think that'll be a double whammy. Because like if I wake up the baby and then I'm like, yeah, by the way, I need it's so much.
And it's hard when it's a neighbor behind you, because like you don't see them coming and going.
No.
Like the neighbor next to you do. The one across the street you do, but not the one behind you.
But the neighbor next to me, I've never talked to them in like 3 years. Every time I say hi, they like run in their house. So I don't know what I do, Brie. And the only
you scare them.
The only interaction I've had with them, which is so bad, but like we have an upstairs on our house, and we have this like upstairs porch, and it looks into the neighbor's yard. And one night they were jackhammering at 10 p.m. and I had to lean over the balcony and be like, hey, my kids are sleeping. Can we stop the jackhammering? And that's really the only time I've ever talked to them.
Interesting.
So it's not conversations I want to have.
I know the feeling. I know the feeling. So it's confrontation, and asking somebody about maintaining their stuff out here is good and bad sometimes. So it can be rough.
That's why I'm going to go with cookies for both of them.
All right.
And just taking pictures and being like, here's the issue.
Yeah.
Just text me. Let me know how we want to solve this. Because I just don't like people hating me.
But it's interesting. It's interesting the way that you're talking about this and the fear of confrontation, because we're going to be talking about something on this episode that also causes people a lot of fear and anxiety.
Yes.
Allowance. I'd like to call this the great allowance debate.
Yes, because like allowance, I feel we have a lot of conflicting issues on it. Because on one side, it's like kids should be paid for the work they do, just like people out in the workforce, so they know the value of a dollar. And on the other side, it's, well, they should contribute to their family, and that should be first. And the allowance could be a separate thing where they learn how to manage their money.
Right. So like I like to look at it as there's the pro-allowance side and then there's the anti-allowance side.
Well, I don't see it that way. I see it as they're both allowance. It's just how do you earn that allowance?
Oh, it's interesting. So when we get into this, I'm going to share some, we put some stuff out on social media and I'm going to share the results of what we got from people about this one.
So get ready. If you have questions about allowance and you don't know where you stand, this is going to be your episode.
Okay, so if you love the No Guilt Mom podcast, and let's just face it, I know you do. I know you love us, man. Then you have got to check out our talented friend, Miss Kara Harvey. She is phenomenal, and she is the host of Purpose Driven Mom Show podcast.
Kara is a productivity coach for moms and mompreneurs, and she helps overwhelmed moms develop systems and routines so that they can manage their time and take action on their goals.
As a mom of 3 and a former school teacher, Kara knows exactly how important it is to have those routines and systems in her home to keep things running smoothly. And she wants to help you get there too.
So check out the link to the Purpose Driven Mom Show in our show notes. And now on with the show.
You want mom life to be easier. That's our goal too. Our mission is to raise more self-sufficient and independent kids, and we're going to have fun doing it. We're going to help you delegate and step back. Each episode will tackle strategies for positive discipline, making our kids more responsible and making our lives better in the process. Welcome to the No Guilt Mom Podcast.
Okay, we are talking about allowance, and I am very opinionated when it comes to allowance and chores.
See, and I'm kind of wishy-washy about this. I've tried a few different systems. I'm not sold on any one, so I'm not as passionate about one versus another. But I do have some things that have worked really well in my family. So,
And we have a system that I feel like works really well in our family. So
yeah. We do. So I wanted to share this little tidbit I found when I was researching for this episode. And I want to ask you, do you give allowance? And if you do, what do you do with that money? Do they get it as actual cash, or do they get it as a credit to use for, money for video games or something else? Is it chore related? Is it not chore related? Is it just for special things or big things? But there was a study that was done recently that said that 89% of parents assign chores related to their allowance for their child. But only 29% of those parents actually make sure that those chores are done before they give their kid their allowance.
And that, I think, is the sticky point with allowance, because that's always how I saw it. Like my experience when I was a kid with allowance, my dad made out this really complicated table where I had to check off everything, and I got like a nickel for one chore and a dime for another chore.
God, can you imagine nickel and diming these days?
Yeah.
The value of $1.
Yeah. But you know what? That chart lasted a week because,
and you were like, forget it.
There's all of these issues that come up with it, like in terms of management issues. It's like, what happens when the child's like, well, I did the chore, but I didn't mark it down? Like, are you holding a 6-year-old accountable for marking down their chores? Like, even if they did it? And then when it's parent follow-up, like it's the parent's job then to check exactly like how many chores are done and what the payout is, and remember to do that on a weekly basis while balancing all the other things you have to do as an adult.
It is a lot. And you know what I think is interesting? One thing you said there was your experience as a kid.
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of us, we are not necessarily motivated, but we were definitely impacted by what we had growing up. And, and I did throw this question out on social media. I asked parents how they handled allowance in their home. We had over 100 responses.
Yeah.
And it was kind of crazy. So like a few of them were like, parents were like, there's no allowance in my home, but they do have chores to get done. And we allow them to buy things. So in other words, like the parent was like, okay, so we don't give them allowance. They come to me and then I'll give them money to buy something if I want to, which I don't know, to me sounds like allowance. It does.
But like also, okay, so when you give them money to buy something when they're allowed to, like, when does it end?
Exactly,
because
right?
Because my kids would try that too. And I noticed that every time I was going to Target, I would be in a bad mood. And who wants to be in a bad mood at Target?
I know, right? Target is supposed to be our
Target
sanctuary.
is magical. But they would be like asking for everything on the shelves. And there's no way for me to say no, because it's the argument about like, oh, but you guys can afford it. I'm like, yeah, we can afford it, but we don't want to buy that for you.
Right.
And then it becomes an argument versus like what they want versus what we want. And it's so stressful.
Well, and it's also hard, I mean, quite honestly, in that scenario, to figure out how much you're giving your kids and how much they're really spending.
Yeah.
So like, again, like all the responses I got, they were kind of crazy. So like another one was, well, we do a combination in our house. They do whatever chores I give them, and we pay them for getting good grades like A's and B's. And if they want to earn money, I can give them additional chores. Now that statement right there, I have a lot to unpack with that one, but I'm going to let that one go. We'll talk about that one in a little bit. Another one was that they make a small allowance for their kids that are attached to chores. And they say that it's helped their kids tremendously in figuring out how to spend and save up for money and whether or not it's worth spending money on.
And that's how I view allowance too.
Yeah.
But we can go into my system.
Well, and then somebody had the same response that I was talking to Miguel about how he did allowance with his kid when he was younger. And he was saying, well, we did allowance based on age. So every year they got the same dollar worth that their age was. So yeah, there were chores that my kid had to do in the home, but regardless, when he was 10, he got $10 a week. And then when he's 11, he got $11 a week, and so on and so forth.
I really liked that. I think I need to go back to how we set up allowance and maybe do that, because that'll uncomplicate some things we have going on.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's some really good options we're hearing from people on here. But what I kept hearing over and over again was pretty much either yes, my kid gets allowance, or no, my kid doesn't get allowance.
And attaching allowance to the chores actually getting done.
Right. And I think that's the big part that people argue a lot about is like whether or not you attach it to chores.
Hey all, Bree here, and I wanted to share one of my favorite gifts to give during the holiday season, a Storyworth book. It is the most amazing gift ever. Storyworth is an online service that lets you create a special and unique gift of someone's story. I've given Storyworth books to both of my parents, and it has been their favorite gift, hands down. And did I mention it is so easy? Storyworth emailed my parents questions every week that I handpicked from their massive list of questions that they have. All my parents had to do was open their email and answer them. That easy. I asked my dad questions like, did you have any rules that you set for yourself as a parent, which you immediately broke? And he did. I even asked both of my parents, are you more like your mom or your dad? And they shared a lot of really amazing qualities that I didn't know about my grandparents at the time. Then at the end of the year, Storyworth compiles all of their answers, puts them into this gorgeous book that covers everything. My parents love showing us their books, and I personally love getting a chance to read them. With Storyworth, I am giving those I love a thoughtful and personal gift from the heart that preserves their memories and stories for years to come. Go to storyworth.com/NGM and save $10 on your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/NGM to save $10 on your first purchase.
This message is sponsored by Greenlight. It is so hard to raise kids who know how to manage money. Bree, right now, my kids are all about earning money for presents. My daughter wants to get presents for all of her friends, and my son is doing a Secret Santa with his friends.
Oh, I hear you. And if you're looking to raise kids that are financially responsible, we have got a lifesaver recommendation for you that you need to check out. It is Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app made for families that gives kids and teens an easy and fun way to gain financial literacy, all while giving parents peace of mind.
You can send instant money transfers, automate allowance, and even keep an eye on kids' spending with real-time notifications. Meanwhile, your kids can begin their journey towards financial autonomy by learning how to save, invest, and spend wisely.
So sign up for Greenlight today and get your first month free when you go to greenlight.com/NGM.
That's greenlight.com/NGM to try Greenlight for free. Greenlight.com/NGM.
So let's talk about that. So how are chores in your house?
So chores in my house, they both have their set chores to do each week. And it's tied to basically their family contribution.
Okay.
Whereas I don't hold allowance over them if they don't do their chores, but I do hold other things over them. It's more of a like social thing. Like if my daughter wants me to take her to the mall, I'll be like, sure, I'll take you to the mall. Like when you unload the dishwasher, then we'll go to the mall.
Okay.
And so I use a lot of when-thens for related to chores.
So then how is allowance earned in your home? Because I'm hearing that it's not tied to chores.
It's not. They just get a set amount each week. And I need to raise their allowance. But my kids get, I believe my son is at $5 a week and my daughter's at $6 a week.
Mm-hmm.
And then they get a separate clothing allowance because after our interview with Ron Lieber, who wrote the book, oh my gosh, now I'm going to forget the name of the book, but we will put his book's name in the show notes. He suggested to give kids a clothing budget. And then like they have to make these choices. Oh, do I buy that Lego set or do I go without underwear? And he says it's hilarious and really great life lessons. So we started giving them a clothing budget. And now my daughter has a $50 clothing budget a month, which is not too much when like especially you're talking about a middle school girl.
Right, a middle school girl who also does have, you have a split thing there because she goes to a school with uniforms and then she has the clothing that she wants to spend to wear on the weekend and then she's also in dance.
She's in dance.
There's
and
a lot
I do
of
make
things.
her buy the dance outfits, like not the costumes. I think $50 a month would not cover
But the rehearsal
costumes,
practice.
So like rehearsal
what you wear
and
every
practice
day.
stuff. Yeah, what you wear every day. And my son, we give him his clothing budget quarterly so that he can buy his stuff with that. We just started clothing budgets this year.
Okay.
And we saw how they worked and we need to up their clothing budget because we did not budget enough for it.
Yeah, it's funny when you're trying to just go like, well, I think we spend this much on this. It really is hard.
It's hard. It's really hard to like, you don't realize how much money you actually spend, which is great for kids to know as well.
Well, and it's also hard when they're going through growth spurts, which we were both dealing with our kids.
Yeah. I mean,
You just bought something last month and now all of a sudden it doesn't fit anymore.
Oh, with dance and the point shoes. My daughter just started point, which is like a whole new world for me. But they're like $95 and they have to be perfectly fitted. Else like kids could really injure themselves on point if the shoes don't fit. And she had a growth spurt like a month after we bought them. And now we have to buy new ones because it's, and I checked at the dance store. They're like, it's cutting into her Achilles. She's going to injure that. I'm like, darn it all.
Honey, how much do you really want to keep doing ballet? Let's just talk about
Well, she does. She'd rather drop out of ballet, but she likes all the other dance.
Oh my gosh. Oh my
What about
gosh,
your
yeah.
house?
Okay, so in my house, it has gone through a lot of transitions. And I would say the biggest thing that impacts the way that we handle chores and allowance right now is the fact that I am a divorced mom with 50-50 custody. So because of that, so allowance used to be tied to chores. But then what I found happened as they got older and they started doing more things. Like my daughter had volleyball practice and then they had church youth group they wanted to go to. And, you know, my son might have like a big project that he's working on that he's got to get done. I only get one weekend with them and then they go to their dad's house. So if something doesn't get done right when they're with me for the weekend, I can't just say we'll get it done next weekend. Mm-hmm. So I used to tie allowance to chores. I don't anymore because I just didn't feel like it was fair. It was causing them stress and me stress. Mm-hmm. And like you just said, like I have a million other things to do.
Yeah.
And so did they. And I didn't want to cause more stress. So they get a flat allowance of like $20 a month. Mm-hmm. And I do remind them that they need to get their chores done if they have forgotten. Like they do get to pick the day they're going to do it. And for those of you guys that have listened before, you know that in our household, everybody picks their chores. We have a family meeting. We list all the chores that need to be done and everybody picks what they want to have as their responsibility.
Which is what we do as well, yeah.
Right, right. So they have chores that they have to do. They have their everyday stuff like, you know, got to make up your bed, got to put your stuff away, got to empty the dishwasher. And then they have their weekly chores like my daughter has to wash the dog, it has to dust the house and blah, 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 blah. But they get their $20 a month and that's what it is. Now, here's the only crappy part about it. Because I get them every other week and it's not always like works out exactly. Sometimes I forget to give them their allowance.
Okay, so here's what I do for that because that was my problem too. I was doing like this all cash system where it was like dollar bills and they would separate it into the jars of like save, spend, and then donate.
Yeah, I was not that good.
I was that good for like I got like $100 bills from the bank, so I was good about as long as that stack of dollar bills lasted. But then when I ran out, I'm like, oh crap, I have to go back to the bank, and then I never did. And then I'm like, well, this system is not working in my lifestyle. So what I found it does is that I have spreadsheets for both of them for their allowance. Mm-hmm. And my husband and I both have access to these spreadsheets so that anytime my kids want to buy something, we go into the spreadsheet and we put that in the spreadsheet that they bought it for this amount, and it's automatically deducted from their allowance bank account. And then the weekly allowance, it's just a spreadsheet formula. So if I forget a week, I'm just like, I take the row and I just go whoop and I fill it in and it's there. So it works out well for us. And we also are able to give them interest in that spreadsheet. So they get 4%. They get a really good interest rate. They get 4% interest on like the amount they have in the quote unquote bank. So if they keep their allowance in there longer, they actually accrue a lot of money in interest.
Okay, so I have an interesting question. Have you ever thought about opening a bank account for them?
They're not old enough. They weren't old enough for like a debit card or anything like that. And since they're not old enough for a debit card, I couldn't easily take out the money when they wanted to buy something. And so that would have made it harder.
Okay.
Once like my daughter is old enough, and she's going to be old enough very, very soon for a debit card, then I'll be transferring it all over to her.
Now, how come it has to be a debit and not a savings account? Because again, it comes back to you having to go to the bank.
Yeah, it's me having to go to the bank and me having to rearrange all that money. And that's just something that I don't think teaches my kids at that point.
Because it's all on you.
It's all on me, yeah.
But it's not all on you keeping track of the spreadsheet, though?
No, because they do it right there with us. So like I can pull that up on my phone and
so
I'm like,
you bring them in and they have to help do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they'll ask me, they'll be like, how much do I have in my bank account? I'm like, oh, let's just see. Here you go. This is how much you have. And here's what you have to spend. And,
okay.
And then they can make their own decisions when they're at Target and want all the things, if they're going to need clothes later or if they are going to buy.
Right. I think that's a really good system. So like one thing that that I alluded to earlier and said we'll talk about it later, and you and I both feel very passionately about this, is the whole thought process. And I do tie this into allowance, by the way. I think that this is something that people view as an allowance type thing. Paying for grades.
Can't do it.
Can't do it either.
I can't do it. It's like, and there's so many reasons why.
Let's share just now we're not saying it's bad if you do. Every family does what you need to do, but these are our reasons as to why we don't do them.
It's not a motivator for kids to do well in school. Like if we're talking about motivation and we talk about extrinsic motivation, which is getting rewards and prizes for doing something, and paying for grades is very much an extrinsic motivator. And as long as that motivator exists, that paying for grades, then kids will do it. But as soon as that motivator disappears, the kid's motivation disappears. It's not like you're teaching them to actually find interest in the material or actually become involved in their education instead of just trying to get a good grade. And it also adds a bit of stress to kids because if they're having problems with a teacher or whatever, trying to get that A or B is going to be really hard. And that's how it is in the real world too. Like it's asking for that perfection that, is very stressful to attain.
We're hitting that time of year where my brain gets so overloaded in December that I look for anything to make life easier. And I have to say, Brie, that Green Chef is one of those services.
Yes, Green Chef is there to take away the dreaded, oh my goodness, what are we going to eat for dinner tonight? You can eat clean all holiday long with over 80 weekly meal options each week, featuring things like quick and easy, protein-packed, calorie-smart, or my personal favorite, the keto options.
And you don't have to lose track of healthy eating habits during the holidays because every Green Chef customer gets a free session with one of their registered dietitians who can walk you through how to make clean eating work for you, which is very cool.
And I have to say that I have been loving their recipes lately. They put things together I have never thought of. This week, we're trying the lemon basil caper pork with sauteed cauliflower, bell peppers, almonds, and feta cheese, my favorite. Their recipes make it so easy to support my wellness goals without skipping on flavor.
For Green Chef's best deal of the year, get $250 off with code NGM250 at greenchef.com/NGM250. That's greenchef.com/NGM250. And don't forget to use that code NGM250 to get $250 off.
Green Chef, the #1 meal kit for eating well.
My son is playing a game right now on his computer where he's a thief and the cops are after him. So I'm so excited about this new app, Give As We Grow, where instead of being the quote unquote bad guys, kids are practicing giving back.
That is so cool, Joanne. I really wish that there was something like this when my kids were younger that got them excited about giving back to others and helped them build a better understanding of what it really means to volunteer.
Give As We Grow is the first of its kind free educational mobile app for children ages 8 to 11 that teaches kids via fun, service-focused minigame quests to tap into their unique talents and interests to help others.
And did you know that studies show that there is a biological connection between generosity and happiness, and that volunteering improves people's physical and mental health? I mean, kids who volunteer typically do better in school and are less likely to engage in risky behaviors. And that is something that I think we all want for our kids.
Ready to spark a new movement in generosity? Find and download Give As We Grow for free in the App Store for Android and iOS. And for resources for the whole family, visit giveaswegrow.org.
Right, right. And it's interesting because we've had Ned Johnson on the show, who is a co-author of The Self-Driven Child. Mm-hmm. And he talks about that in his book, too, about how they don't really work in the long run.
They don't work in the long run.
You have to have your child be self-driven.
Yeah.
So I come from a two-pointer. That as well, same as you, that it's putting money towards grades. And if they don't manage to get that grade, then I feel like it puts an unnecessary amount of stress on them. And it's also, like you said, not teaching them to really work hard for themselves.
Yeah.
They're working hard for the cash bonus, which in life, you don't always get a cash bonus. Let's just be honest.
You don't.
I've had lots of great jobs in my life, and never, ever have I had a job that gave me a cash bonus for what I was able to export. But then again, I worked in the social field.
And also,
field.
if we think about grades too, we have to think about, well, how are those grades attained? Well, first of all, they're very subjective. It's usually the teacher grading something based on their criteria, which may or may not represent what the real world finds useful. So testing, for instance, and multiple choice testing. I mean, how many times do you take a multiple choice test when you're an adult?
Right.
You don't. And it doesn't encourage those critical thinking skills and problem solving skills that are messy and that can't be put, a grade cannot be put on problem solving or grappling with a challenge. And there's going to be so much failure associated with grappling with the challenge, but it's such good failure. And that doesn't come out in grades.
So I totally hear that. My other reasons why I don't do cash for grades are, one, being a single mom, I just didn't have that extra money in the budget. I mean, some weeks it was hard enough just to give them an allowance, to be able to give them an amount that would be worth it for their grades. Because let's just be honest, when you've got a kid that's in fourth, fifth grade up, they don't want $5 for an A.
No,
they
it's
expect more than that.
It's demeaning.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just didn't have it in my budget. And I felt awful trying to say well, I'll give you $5 for an A. And then my kid would be like, I get $5 for my allowance.
If you're feeling like that right now, know that you do not have to give money for grades.
Right. No, that's it. And I think it's, again, in our family, I just didn't see the benefit of it. It's a value that we had that we do not place on the letter grade.
Yeah.
We try to place it on the effort. And we do have a lot of discussions. Last year, I had my first bout with one of my kiddos getting C's and a D. Oh my God, never saw a D before in a report card. That was a lot for me to unpack. And then also really question myself, and then talking to my kid about, were you putting in the effort? What was going on? Long story short, came to find out that my kid was struggling, but they didn't want to ask for help.
Yeah.
And
I think that's one of the downsides of paying for grades, because if they don't get the letter grade, you're like, oh my gosh, you just don't get your money. And you don't get a chance to get down into that. Okay, so what's going on? Because I think grades in school have been looked at for so long that, you just didn't work hard enough.
Right.
When really there's so much more going on and so much that we can help our kids with if we take away that shame.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think one thing that kind of talking about where we're at on this one, I'm definitely pro allowance.
Yes.
I think there's a lot of things that kids learn from that. And I think it's also interesting because I think your perspective changes as your children become more independent, right? So I definitely look at the lessons my kids are learning with allowance much different now that they are going out and going shopping with their friends.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And now that my son is in high school, yeah.
We've been doing allowance for 3 to 4 years. I can't remember how long. But my daughter actually knows the value of things. Before we did allowance, she'd just be like, oh, get me that. I want that. And then when we put it in her control, she's like, oh my gosh, $30 for a sweatshirt? That's a lot of money. Because she knew the impact it would make on her allowance.
And it's funny. We both have our oldest kids are no, it's my money. and they don't want to spend it on anything.
Yeah.
Like as soon as you bring it up to like, well, you can buy it yourself, they're like, nope, never mind, keeping it in the bank.
Yeah.
And then our youngest are like,
I have $1. Let's spend it.
I have $1. What can I buy? What can I buy?
Oh my! So I was thinking about that the other day because I'm reading Michelle Borba's book Thrivers, and I'm like, that has to do a little bit with self-control, and I'm like, oh, I may need to work with some self-control and delayed gratification with my son.
That's a very good point.
That's really a delayed gratification thing, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, we can have this discussion now because now I have the like verbiage to have it around instead of just like, you should save your money. Instead, it'll be like, hey, what's really important is if we like delay the things that make us happy so we get like bigger things in the future and a bigger reward.
Right.
So let's practice delaying that.
I think it's very, very interesting. So like an example of something that's coming up here, like our daughters are taking a trip with their Girl Scout troop. They're going to be going on a trip and we had to provide them with some money. And I gave my daughter all of her money in gift cards. And I did tell her, okay, look, you're going on this trip. I'm not going to be there. You've got other adults that are there, but they're not going to be monitoring this gift card. So if I were you, I would really keep track of this because there is nothing more embarrassing than getting up to that checkout counter and handing them your card and they go, I'm sorry, it's declined. There isn't enough money.
But what a great life lesson.
It is. So I'm kind of hoping that she gets to that. But she, as soon as I told her that, her eyes got real big and she's like, oh, you're right.
Oh, with my daughter, well, I'm going on this trip because I'm the troop leader. And she's like, so like when we order food, you're going to get me stuff. And I'm like, nope. I'm giving you your money beforehand. You are taking care of it yourself.
Right. Like, so like, it's fine. I could have given her cash, but honestly, I wanted to see my daughter be able to maintain it with a little bit more thought.
Yeah.
So I'll be honest, guys, I'm being a little bit sneaky and mean.
No,
like,
that's not mean.
Well,
I don't
I'm
think
just
it's
saying, I
mean.
could have given her cash. And even for me, cash is way easier to keep track of.
I think this is the things that makes parenting enjoyable. And by the way, okay, they're going to Disney. So by the way, Disney gives you a receipt with your gift card balance every time you make a purchase.
But I also gave her a Visa gift card.
Oh,
But
okay.
I think that one will probably come back with the balance. But either way, she's got to figure this out.
got to figure it out.
And I think it'll be a very good lesson for her on learning about that cash management. So kind of looking back at this, I think that our main thing to take away is that we both feel like allowance is helpful in our house.
It's helpful. And all of like the money, a lot of the money experts agree with us. Not all of them, like Dave Ramsey and Susie Cruz are totally against this. So if you follow Dave Ramsey, you'll be like, what are they talking about? However, all of the child psychologists we've talked to are for this, separating allowance from chores. Ron Lieber, who's a journalist for the New York Times and Money, and I remember the book, The Opposite of Spoiled.
There we go. I knew spoiled was in the title. I'm like, I could see it with the 3 jars.
He suggests this method of separating it from chores.
So I guess the big thing we're coming back to is that we see the positive benefit of the life skills you're teaching your children by giving them money management. It's going to be hard for them to get that skill if they don't receive it on a regular basis, such as an allowance type setting.
Yeah.
But for your family, you're going to have to decide what your values are going forward. But hopefully we presented some information now for you to kind of like food for thought about, do I really want to tie it to chores? Do I not want to tie it to chores?
And bringing it back to that study where 89% of parents assign chores, but only 29% make sure the chores got done. So are you sending those mixed messages by saying it's tied to chores, but then the chores aren't getting done? And so now you feel like your kids are taking advantage of you. If you're having all those feelings, which I would.
Oh, well, I'm thinking to myself, not only mixed messages. What am I teaching my kids? I'm teaching my kids that if you keep me distracted enough, you can get away with doing stuff that...
Which I think my kids already know.
I know,
about
but
me.
I don't want to encourage it.
They're like, look, Mom, a squirrel. And I'm like, what?
We're both like, what? Yeah. So when it comes to allowance, you're going to do what you need to do, what's best for your family. But we do highly encourage it. From the No Guilt Mom side, we think that there's a lot of life skills that you can teach your children with them. And it's a real positive. And we both are... The things we definitely agree on is not paying for grades and not paying for
grades,
chores
not paying for
necessarily. But they should have chores.
Yes, they
Those
should have
teachers'
chores.
responsibility.
They should have chores. Just not connected.
Yeah, teachers' responsibility. And hey, it shouldn't all be on your shoulders.
No,
to do
it
everything
shouldn't.
in that household.
As much as you can offload to your kids to manage, the better. And if you want a little bit more help with the chores situation, our course, Calm and Happy Parenting, teaches you the 5-step method to delegate more to your family. So definitely check that out. And we'll put that link in the show notes. So remember, the best mom's a happy mom. Take care of you. We'll talk to you later.
Thanks for stopping by.
Are you looking for something to listen to with your whole family? Then check out 6 Minutes, produced and created by Gen Z Media. With over 200 twisty, cliffhanger-filled episodes, 6 Minutes tells the story of 11-year-old Holiday who was pulled from the icy waters with no memory of who she is or where she came from.
3 years ago, Brinley Pasternak helped the Anders family uncover the truth about Holiday's past. Now she'll need them to help her find the truth about hers. In 6 Minutes Out of Time, the long-awaited sequel, Cyrus Anders is found unconscious near the mysterious Elixir Academy in Florida, and Brinley learns the school may have a shocking connection to her missing mother.
Dive in now and get the most downloaded family audio adventure in history. Follow 6 Minutes wherever you get your podcasts. You can listen early and ad-free with the GZM family subscription.